Tom and Emily thought they had carefully planned every detail, but they never counted on Sarah's determination to uncover the truth. When Sarah stumbled upon the affair between her husband and her best friend, what she didn't expect was how deep the betrayal ran. Now, with evidence in hand and her world shattered, Sarah is ready to confront them both, leading to a shocking revelation that no one saw coming. What will happen when the lies are exposed and the real danger emerges? Sarah and Tom Green had always been the picture of suburban perfection. Their home, nestled in a quiet neighborhood, was a reflection of their status. Spacious, immaculate, with a neatly trimmed lawn and a white picket fence. From the outside, everything seemed ideal. Tom, a successful business consultant, worked long hours but always seemed to make time for family dinners and weekend outings. Sarah, a stay-at-home mom, spent her days managing the home and caring for their two young children, Emma and Jack. Their lives were filled with friends, family gatherings, and a sense of stability that most people would envy. But as the months wore on, Sarah began to feel an unsettling shift in their relationship. Tom, once attentive and affectionate, seemed distant. He would return home late from work more often, his excuses about late meetings growing increasingly routine. The warmth that had once defined their relationship began to feel forced, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. At first she brushed it off as stress from work, or perhaps the demands of family life catching up with them. But as the days turned into weeks, the unease in her gut grew. It was subtle at first, a missed phone call here, a half-hearted smile there. But Sarah started noticing small, seemingly insignificant changes that she couldn't ignore. Tom's phone had become a constant companion, never out of his reach even when they were together. He would check it obsessively, and if she asked who it was, he would always respond with a vague answer or a half-hearted excuse. "Just work stuff," he'd say. But something about the way he said it felt rehearsed, like he was trying too hard to convince her. Then there was the time Sarah discovered a lipstick stain on Tom's shirt. He swore it was from a client he had met earlier in the day, a client who had accidentally brushed against him. It was an easy explanation, but Sarah knew it wasn't true. The lipstick shade wasn't one that Sarah herself wore. It wasn't a big deal, she told herself. Maybe it was just a mistake. But deep down, Sarah's instincts screamed that something was wrong. The worst part, though, was the way Tom seemed to withdraw emotionally. He would sit in front of the TV, zoning out, hardly speaking to her, while Sarah tried to hold everything together. She longed for the man she married, the man who had been her best friend, her confidant, and the person she could always count on. But that person seemed to be slipping away, replaced by someone distant, cold, and increasingly secretive. In the midst of all this, Emily, Sarah's best friend since childhood, had become a frequent visitor at their home. Emily had always been the fun, adventurous one, the person who could make Sarah laugh even on the toughest days. They had been inseparable for years, sharing everything from childhood memories to adult problems. Sarah trusted Emily completely, and in many ways Emily was like the sister Sarah never had. But as Sarah's suspicions about Tom grew, Emily's presence started to make her uncomfortable. Emily and Tom had always gotten along, but recently, there had been something different about their interactions. Emily seemed to laugh a little too hard at Tom's jokes, touch him a little too casually, and linger just a bit too long in his company. Sarah dismissed these thoughts at first, blaming her own insecurities. But the more she observed, the more she began to feel a knot in her stomach. Her best friend and her husband seemed to be getting too close. Closer than was normal even for two people who were friends. When Sarah mentioned it to Tom, he laughed it off, claiming she was overreacting. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was then that the cracks in her marriage began to widen. She found herself constantly questioning Tom's behavior, replaying conversations in her head, analyzing every moment with Emily. wondering if her gut feeling was right. She tried to ignore it, tried to believe that things would get better on their own. But deep down, Sarah knew that something was broken, and it wasn't just the routine of their everyday life. Something dark, something hidden was lurking beneath the surface. And as Sarah began to unravel the truth, she realized the one person she trusted most, her best friend, was the one who had been keeping the most dangerous secret of all. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but she wasn't sure how to confront it. Her mind raced with all the possible explanations. Was she imagining things? Was she just overthinking the subtle changes in Tom's behavior and her discomfort with Emily's increasing presence? Yet the more she tried to convince herself it was nothing, the more her intuition screamed otherwise. She felt like she was living in a fog, unsure of what was real and what was just in her head. The tipping point came one night when Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. Tom had been acting particularly distant for the past few weeks, and his late nights at work had become more frequent. Sarah hadn't intended to check his phone. She never considered herself the type of person to snoop. But a part of her felt that if she didn't she would never find the truth. She had seen him leave it on the kitchen counter, his usual excuse of work calls lingering in the air. Her heart pounded as she picked it up, her fingers shaking as she unlocked the screen. The first thing that caught her eye was a string of messages between Tom and Emily. There was nothing overtly incriminating at first, just casual exchanges about meetings, plans, and updates. But as Sarah scrolled down, her stomach twisted with each message. They had been texting late into the night, sending each other cryptic words of affection, their messages dripping with intimacy. "I can't stop thinking about you," Emily had written just days earlier. "I wish you were here with me." Tom's response was even more telling. It asked not just the nights I am thinking about. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow." Sarah's breath hitched. Her chest tightened as a sickening realization washed over her. The affair wasn't a figment of her imagination. It wasn't just her gut feeling. It was real. The truth crashed over her like a wave, suffocating her. She had known, deep down, but seeing it in writing, seeing the explicit confirmation of Tom and Emily's betrayal, was something else entirely. She felt hollow, like the foundation of her entire life had just crumbled beneath her feet. But what made her blood run cold wasn't just the affair. It was the depth of the betrayal. The messages weren't just about physical attraction. They spoke of something more, something far more intimate and sinister. They spoke of plans. Plans to be together. Plans that had begun months ago and were already taking shape. The affair wasn't a fleeting mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was something premeditated, something that had been nurtured in secret for far too long. Sarah's first instinct was to confront Tom, to demand answers, to shout at him for betraying their family, their life. But as she read the messages over and over, something darker began to emerge in her mind. She realized that this wasn't just about infidelity. It was about manipulation. Emily wasn't just Tom's lover. She had become a force in their lives, manipulating everything from the shadows. She had been there all along, feeding Tom's doubts and weaknesses, making him question his marriage, his life with Sarah. The more Sarah read, the more the pieces began to fit together. Emily wasn't just a casual friend, she was a puppet master pulling the strings. She had always been the one who had pushed Tom further away from Sarah, subtly sowing seeds of doubt in his mind. Emily had been there, in moments when Sarah wasn't looking, to comfort him, to offer a shoulder to lean on. And now, it seemed, she was pushing him toward something far more dangerous, a complete break from the life they had built. As Sarah sat in the dim light of the kitchen, the weight of the truth pressing down on her, her mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. She couldn't just ignore what she had learned. but she also couldn't confront Tom directly without knowing more. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. She needed to understand the full extent of the web that had been spun around her. In a moment of cold clarity, Sarah decided to take action. She hired a private investigator. She didn't want to be left in the dark anymore. She needed someone who could uncover the truth, someone who could follow Tom and Emily, gather evidence, and piece together the puzzle she had only just begun to understand. It was no longer just about saving her marriage. It was about uncovering the lies that had been hidden in plain sight for far too long. As the investigators' work began, Sarah knew there was no going back. The life she had known, the life she had worked so hard to build, was about to come crashing down around her, and with every piece of evidence that surfaced, she could feel the walls of her perfect world crumbling. One secret at a time. The days that followed Sarah's discovery felt like an endless fog. Her mind constantly raced, replaying every moment she'd shared with Tom and Emily, questioning what had gone wrong, and wondering when everything had started to unravel. The betrayal was like a sharp knife twisting in her chest, leaving her breathless and consumed by a whirlwind of emotions. She didn't know what to do with herself. Confronting Tom immediately seemed pointless. He would deny everything, just as he had done when she confronted him about his odd behavior. She had to have something more concrete, something undeniable. Sarah kept herself busy with daily routines, all while the reality of her situation loomed over her. She spent hours pacing the house, distracted by the small details she had never noticed before. The subtle shift in Tom's tone when he spoke to Emily, the extra time Emily spent at their home. How often Tom and Emily were alone together, even when she was just in the other room. It was like a horrible puzzle that she hadn't realized was slowly being put together, one deceitful piece at a time. The private investigator Sarah hired worked quickly. She provided him with the details she had gathered, the late-night meetings, the strange phone calls, the unexplained trips, and asked him to follow Tom and Emily. The investigator was discreet, using the shadows to track their every move. Days later, Sarah received a report that would change everything. The investigator had gathered evidence of a far more serious affair than Sarah had ever imagined. Tom and Emily weren't just sneaking around behind her back. They had been planning something darker. The most disturbing part was the phone records. According to the investigator, Tom and Emily had been communicating about a final solution to their situation. Sarah's stomach churned as she read the report. There were mentions of escaping together, starting a new life, and even phrases like, "There's no turning back now." The messages were full of excitement, anticipation, and a chilling sense of finality. It wasn't just about an affair anymore. They were planning to remove her from the equation entirely. Sarah's heart raced. The thought of her best friend, the woman she had trusted more than anyone, conspiring with her husband to get rid of her, sent waves of disbelief crashing over her. She had known something was off, but she never imagined it could go this far. Emily wasn't just Tom's lover. She had become his partner in crime, a dangerous accomplice willing to destroy everything Sarah held dear. And the scariest part was that Sarah had never seen it coming. Emily had played the role of the loving friend so well that Sarah had never suspected she was anything but a confidant. But now, the truth was undeniable. The investigator had also uncovered something even more chilling. Emily had recently made large financial transactions, purchasing items that could only be used for a drastic life change. There were plane tickets, a new identity, and even plans to move to a different country. The affair was no longer a simple infidelity. It had escalated into something far more dangerous, a calculated effort to take everything from Sarah. Feeling a knot tighten in her chest, Sarah knew what she had to do. She had to confront them, her husband, her best friend, before they had the chance to carry out whatever twisted plan they had in motion. But as she steeled herself for the confrontation, a new wave of fear washed over her. What if they were already too far gone? What if they had already made their move? That evening, Sarah decided to face Tom. She knew it couldn't wait any longer. The secrets were unraveling too quickly, and if she didn't act now, she might lose everything. With trembling hands, she walked into the living room where Tom was sitting, reading a book. He didn't look up when she entered, his face cold and distracted, just like it had been for months. "Tom," she said, her voice unsteady but determined. "We need to talk." He looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. "About what?" he asked, his tone casual, as though he had no idea what was coming. "About you and Emily," Sarah said, her voice cracking as she spoke her best friend's name. "I know everything." Tom's face changed, but it wasn't the look of guilt Sarah had hoped for. It was a mix of irritation and something darker, something almost resentful. He set the book down and stood up slowly, facing her. "You don't know anything," he replied coldly. "This is none of your business, Sarah." For the first time in months, Sarah felt a surge of anger. How dare he dismiss her like that? How dare he act as though all of this, everything they had built together, meant nothing? "It is my business, Tom," she shouted, her voice rising. "You've been lying to me, you've been lying to both of us, and I know what you and Emily have been planning. I've seen the messages. I've seen the plans. This isn't just an affair. This is something worse." Tom's face twisted with a mix of guilt and something else. Something far more dangerous. "You don't understand," he said, his voice suddenly softer, but laced with a cold edge. "It's over, Sarah. It's been over for a long time." In that moment, Sarah realized the truth. This wasn't just about love or betrayal. It was about control. Tom wasn't the man she had married. And Emily, her so-called best friend, was nothing more than a manipulative accomplice, a woman willing to go to any lengths to take what she wanted. Sarah's entire world felt like it was shattering piece by piece. The perfect life she had built, the family she had dreamed of, was nothing but a facade. What had started as a whisper in the back of her mind had now become a horrifying reality, and there was no going back. As Tom and Emily's web of lies closed in around her, Sarah realized she was no longer just fighting for her marriage. She was fighting for her life. The truth hit Sarah like a tidal wave, sweeping away any semblance of the life she once knew. Tom's confession, his cold dismissal of her concerns, left her breathless. It was clear now that her worst fears were no longer just paranoia. They were her reality. Tom wasn't just involved in an affair with Emily. He was complicit in something far more sinister. His betrayal went beyond infidelity. It was a carefully planned, calculated attempt to tear their family apart. The coldness in his eyes, the venom in his words, left Sarah feeling like a stranger in her own home. Her world, once filled with security and comfort, now felt like a prison. The house, once a sanctuary for her family, became a battleground. The walls that once seemed to echo with laughter now felt suffocating, a constant reminder of the lies and deceit that surrounded her. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't stay in a place that held the memories of what was now shattered. Sarah needed answers, but she also knew she couldn't trust Tom anymore. He was no longer the man she had married. The private investigator had already uncovered so much. Messages between Emily and Tom, plans for a future together, and disturbing references to a final step in their affair. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the report again. Emily and Tom were plotting something far more dangerous than simply running away together. They were planning to remove her, to erase her from the life she had built. The chilling truth was too much to ignore. With every passing moment, Sarah grew more desperate to find the truth. She knew she had to confront Emily, but she was terrified of what would happen when she did. Emily was no longer the friend she trusted. She was an enemy, one who had worked in the shadows to destroy everything Sarah held dear. Emily had been playing a dangerous game, manipulating Tom and Sarah alike. She had carefully orchestrated her role as the innocent best friend, always there when needed. But behind Sarah's back she was plotting something far more sinister. Sarah spent days in a fog of disbelief, her mind racing with possible scenarios. Confronting Emily was inevitable. She had to hear it from her own lips, the full extent of the betrayal, the twisted plan that had been set in motion. But deep down, Sarah feared what would happen if Emily didn't crack, if she denied everything and continued to play the innocent victim. Emily was a master manipulator, and Sarah knew that she couldn't trust her. The evening of the confrontation arrived. Sarah had arranged to meet Emily at a quiet cafe, a neutral ground where they could talk without interruptions. As Sarah sat at the table, her hands clammy with anticipation, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Her best friend, the woman she had shared her life with, was about to be revealed for the monster she truly was. Emily arrived late, her usual confident stride replaced by an unease that Sarah could sense from the moment she walked in. Emily was wearing a bright smile as though nothing had changed, as though their friendship was still intact. But Sarah wasn't fooled. She had seen the signs, and now she was ready to hear the truth. They exchanged pleasantries for a moment, but the tension in the air was thick, suffocating. Sarah couldn't hold it in any longer. She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper but sharp with the weight of her words. "Emily, I know what you and Tom have been planning," Sarah said, her voice shaking but her eyes fixed on her friend. "I know about the affair, about everything." The smile faded from Emily's face. In that moment, Sarah saw the cracks in the facade. Emily's calm demeanor faltered, but only for a moment. Then just as quickly, it was replaced with an icy coolness. "Sarah, I don't know what you're talking about," Emily replied, her tone smooth, calculated. "You're being paranoid. There's nothing going on between Tom and me. I'm just your friend." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. Emily's denial was expected, but it didn't make it any less painful. "Don't lie to me, Emily," Sarah said, her voice firm now, with a quiet, controlled fury. "I've seen the messages, I've seen everything. You've been planning this for months. You've been trying to take him from me, and now you're plotting to get rid of me. You've been a part of this from the start." Emily's eyes flickered for a moment, a brief flash of panic crossing her face before she regained control. Her composure was frightening, like a predator who had just been cornered but was calculating her next move. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Emily said, her voice colder than ever. "Tom and I have something special. He doesn't love you anymore, Sarah, he never did. You're just a comfort to him, something he's been holding on to because it's easier than facing the truth." Sarah's chest tightened with rage and betrayal. Emily had not only stolen her husband but had twisted the knife by attacking her in the cruelest way possible. She had destroyed Sarah's trust, and now she was mocking her, trying to break her down even further. "I'm not going to let you get away with this," Sarah said, her voice low, dangerous. "I will expose everything. You're not going to destroy my life any longer." The weight of Sarah's words seemed to land heavily on Emily, but she only laughed, a hollow, empty sound that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "You can try, but it won't matter. Tom and I have already made our plans. There's nothing you can do to stop us." The words cut through Sarah like a blade. She had been blind for too long, trusting someone who never deserved her loyalty. In that moment, everything became clear. Emily had been planning this for a long time, and now she was taunting Sarah, knowing that she had the upper hand. As Sarah left the cafe, her heart was heavy, her mind racing with the enormity of the betrayal. She had come to confront Emily, but in the end, she realized that the truth was even darker than she had feared. It wasn't just a simple affair. It was a calculated, malicious scheme to erase her from the picture entirely. And now, Sarah knew she had to act fast before it was too late. The time for being passive had passed. It was time to fight for her life. The weight of the conversation with Emily hung heavily in the air, suffocating Sarah as she walked out of the cafe. She could still hear the echoes of Emily's chilling words in her head, each one like a poison injected into her bloodstream. Tom and Emily had made plans that didn't include her, that excluded her from the life she thought was hers. But now Sarah had a clarity she hadn't had before. She wasn't going to let them take everything from her. She wasn't going to let them destroy her family, her life, without a fight. The time for passivity, for sitting back and hoping the situation would resolve itself, was over. It was time to expose them for who they truly were. As Sarah drove home, her mind was already working through what she needed to do next. She had the evidence, the messages, the investigator's report, the plans Tom and Emily had been making behind her back. Now it was time to make them face the truth. She knew she couldn't just confront Tom on her own. He had already shown how manipulative and cold he could be. But she wasn't alone. She had the support of the investigator and, more importantly, her own inner strength, which she had underestimated for so long. It was time to turn the tables. The first step was making sure the private investigator stayed on the case. There was no turning back now, and Sarah wanted to be sure they had enough evidence to back her up when it came time to expose the affair and the sinister plans behind it. The investigator had already done great work, but Sarah needed more. She needed to gather all the evidence possible: texts, emails, financial transactions, and anything else that could prove Emily and Tom's conspiracy. She needed a trail that was undeniable, something that even Tom couldn't talk his way out of. The next few days were filled with tension, as Sarah watched every move Tom made, silently observing, taking mental notes. All the while her stomach churned with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Tom's behavior had grown even more erratic. He was more distant, more secretive. He spent hours locked in his office, phone constantly in hand, his responses to her questions becoming shorter and more dismissive. He had no idea that Sarah was onto him. That, perhaps, was the only small piece of satisfaction she had left in this dark moment. Finally, the day came. The investigator had gathered all the necessary evidence: screenshots of messages, proof of financial transactions, and even photographs of Tom and Emily meeting in places they hadn't told Sarah about. There was no more doubt. Emily's manipulative web had been exposed, and Tom's role in it was laid bare. It was time to confront them one last time. Sarah invited Tom to dinner, under the pretense of wanting to talk, to work through the tension that had been building for so long. Tom, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit, agreed without hesitation. He had no idea that the evening was going to be his reckoning. As they sat down to a quiet meal, Sarah could feel the calm before the storm, her heart pounding in her chest as she prepared herself. She needed to stay composed, to not let the overwhelming emotions take over. She had been calm, patient, and strategic. Tonight, that would pay off. "Tom," she began, her voice steady but firm, "I know everything. About you and Emily. About the plans you've made to get rid of me. I've seen the messages, I've seen the proof. There's nothing left to hide." Tom froze mid-bite, his eyes narrowing as he processed her words. For the first time in a long while, Sarah saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a mix of surprise and something darker, something almost predatory. He quickly wiped his mouth with a napkin and set it down, his face hardening. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, trying to dismiss the truth, but his voice was shaking ever so slightly. His usual arrogance had slipped, revealing the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about, Tom," Sarah said, her voice now cold with determination. "I've seen everything. I've spoken to Emily. I know about your plans to run away together. I know you're planning to leave me, and you've been manipulating me for months." For a moment, the room was silent. Tom's eyes flicked from Sarah to the documents she had laid out on the table. His expression darkened as he realized the full extent of the situation. His mind raced, calculating the damage, but there was no way out of this. Sarah had already won this battle. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" he asked, his voice laced with frustration. "I want the truth, Tom," she replied, her voice unwavering. "I want you to admit everything. I want you to understand the pain you've caused me. You don't get to manipulate me any longer. You don't get to take what's mine." Tom slumped back in his chair, defeated. He knew he had been caught, but his pride refused to let him give in completely. He glared at Sarah, his eyes full of contempt. "You're too late, Sarah," he sneered. "You can't stop me now. Emily and I have already made our plans. It's over." Sarah shook her head, her heart heavy but resolute. "No, Tom, it's not over. Not until I say it is." She placed the evidence on the table between them, watching as his face paled when he saw it all laid bare. She wasn't going to let him destroy her family, and destroy everything she had worked for. She had fought back and she had won. Tom sat there silent now, the weight of his actions sinking in. But Sarah wasn't done. She still had one more piece to move. She knew that exposing the affair wasn't enough. She needed to take control of her life again. With the evidence she had gathered, she could ensure that Tom and Emily would be held accountable, that they would face the consequences of their actions. And as Sarah left the room that night, her heart was heavy but empowered. The battle wasn't over yet, but she had taken the first step toward reclaiming her life.